Hey guys, we're live. I mean, recorded. And
Yes, we recorded this while we're still alive.
Yep.
And we have a special guest here, Tobias. Look at this. Tobias, cover your parts, please.
God damn it, I
This
just lost the guitar again. It's on the ground. It irritates me.
irritates you.
It drives me crazy.
Well, when you have 55 guitars, it's no wonder that one of them is going to be on the ground. It's only natural.
Yeah, anyway, so you're here. We're not on Skype.
I'm here this time. Yes, I decided to make this the internet connection better by actually being here, and I wish the circumstances were better in which we're meeting, but unfortunately, the reason I'm here is, so the reason why I wasn't able to contribute and make this video on time this week is because my dad passed away, and I had to come back home and make arrangements. So yeah. So this is why I'm here. It's not the best of reasons, but I decided to address it, and talk about it because I think, when I was kind of setting out to do this thing, the podcast thing, both of us had some ideas and, reasons to do it. But my personal idea was that for many years, every time I was doing comedy shows or doing videos, my only goal was to make people laugh. And just, to goof around and people to laugh and not be serious. But when I started doing the podcast, I thought about something else. For the first time, I thought, why not accept the challenge of actually being maybe useful for people and maybe talk about some stuff that might benefit people, not just by being, funny and entertaining, but also, having some information that people can relate to or can learn from. So this is why I also decided to address this issue. And make this separate podcast, just talk about this and what I'm going through, not because I want to get it off my chest or make a confession or something like this, but because the things that I went through, I think maybe are things that a lot of you guys are going through, and maybe it'll be useful for you to learn from my experience and for me to share with you what happened. And then from next week on, we'll be back on schedule and we'll be back with new guests and just goof around as we did before, I guess. I think,
Maybe this cable is kind of noisy, I think. Yeah.
All right. It's kind of bittersweet to come back home because, it's a nice thing to see you and see friends and everything, but not for the best reason. You know what? Okay, so... maybe I should preface this by saying, why I don't want to... Okay, I want to say a couple of things just to make sure that this doesn't sound like I'm trying to make this a clickbaity kind of thing where I talk about my problems.
Like story time.
Yeah. See, you remember this. When I was here and we were doing the shows and I was doing comedy and doing my videos, every time someone would invite me anywhere on TV or on radio, or I would do some magazine interviews, and by invite me, I mean I would self-invite myself 90% of the time. But every time they would do that, they also wanted every time to have some sort of a tagline for me and a one-word description of who I am. And everyone used to call me a blogger or a vlogger. And I would hate that a lot because for me, the people that I knew in Bulgaria who were actual bloggers or vloggers were people who were doing this for themselves. There was kind of, they were sharing experiences like what they're going through, and it was all about, how, about themselves.
It's like whatever everyone is going through, like nothing special. Like.
Right. But
people were relating to it, yeah.
Yes. But what I was trying to do was different. So what I was trying always to do was, to make people laugh, and it was about the crowd. So every time I would go out, it was like, if people laugh, then I did my job. It doesn't matter how I feel, if I'm going through a rough time or I'm happy, it doesn't matter. It's all about the people and how they relate to. Nothing I say is serious. Everything I say could be questioned. Everything, is goofy, right? And when I started doing this podcast, I thought maybe, and some of that before it was coming also from some insecurity, because I was thinking, maybe, I don't know, I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough kind of experience in life to talk about actual topics that people are interested in.
And there was also this thing if you talk about YouTube, because at least in Bulgaria, maybe everywhere, but the crowd is younger. They're like kids,
right?
So they can't really relate to you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you talk about your things.
And so this is why the real bloggers were really booming at that point, because see, those are guys who were just like the kids in the sense that they were staying home and doing nothing, and kind of going through their phone and wondering, how this cruel world they live in is making them alienated and pushing them outside the world. And they were relating these stories, and these kids who were, every kid is going through this stage, and we've been going through this stage, and we've been in high school feeling awkward and feeling weird and kind of not having friends, wondering if anyone ever will love us, whatever. But these kids, they just go on their phones, they go on their computers, and so they look for people with the same experiences, and they find these bloggers, and they talk about the same thing, and they're like, oh, that's my friend, now that's my virtual friend, I don't need to have a real friend. And that's the service that they provide. That's why they're so popular. What I was doing was a different kind of service. And when I came to do this podcast, I thought, okay, what if it's not about either of those things, and not just about entertainment, or just about like talking of your own experiences and people kind of sink in with that, but just being interesting and maybe informative and teaching something. And this comes back, this one, and I always wanted. See, when I got into tattoos this year and I did my tattoos, for many years I was thinking about whether I should do tattoos. What would be some message that is so meaningful that I could embed on my body forever, right? And I forever was thinking, what would be the best thing to do? And I actually had a quote before that I still think that I'll probably at one point do and put it on my body permanently. But that's, I think, was it Cicero or... I think it was one of the Roman orators who was writing about public speaking, and his quote was trying to instill in one sentence the goals of every public speaking person, right? Every orator, everyone who's addressing a crowd should do those three things in his opinion.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
right. So there was docere, movere, and delectare, which is in Latin, it means teach, move, and entertain, right? So you can teach, you can be informative with whatever you're doing. So it could be stand-up, it could be music, it could be any kind of art, it could be a movie, it could be a YouTube video. You can teach someone with that, you can convey useful information. You can move them emotionally, right? Or you can just entertain. So for many years I was just focused on entertainment. Now I'm trying to shift, maybe by inviting interesting people with interesting experiences, maybe because I already have some experiences, maybe I can try to also inform people, right? So I'm still at this stage where I'm trying to do that. And coming back to that, the reason I mentioned that is because I wanted to do this particular episode and want to talk about these things now, not because I want to just share my own experience and get it off my chest or whatever, but because I think that in those things maybe there's some things that some people are going through, and they're kind of afraid or shy to share with people and can't find information elsewhere. So.
Or they will go through. Everyone will go through this.
Yeah, right. I mean, the thing is, my parents were kind of older in the, I think, at least in the standards of the 90s when I was born, when they had me, and so I maybe went through these things that everyone probably goes through, but a little earlier. So even if this is watched by people my age or younger, then probably they will go through this at some point or another. We all kind of go through it. And the other thing is, because I went kind of younger, the other thing is that I kind of went through it alone. Usually you go through these things when you have family, you have, I don't know, in the best case scenario, a wife, some kids, and someone who can help you. There's a lot of people around you, or you have brothers and sisters. I don't have either of those. I was just by myself when this happened, when both my mom and my dad died. And, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that having that experience kind of taught me maybe even more about how to handle those situations. So I wanted to share those things with you, and I don't know, maybe this will be useful to you. So so I guess I can talk maybe a little about my dad and what happened to him, and I don't know, in the process maybe my mom will come up. So my dad my dad was 76 when he passed away, and this happened a couple of days ago, and in the last couple of months he had dementia, and he was suffering from that, and it kind of progressed really fast. It was unusually fast, actually, which is kind of surprising, but this was not really the only issue that he was dealing with in his life. So maybe it was also a kind of a psychological thing that made things progress a little further, because during his life he had another big problem, another big kind of psychological problem that he was dealing with, which is a kind of very putting a very, very big strain on our family and on his life personally, on the quality of his life too, especially in the later years of his life. And I focused a lot of energy, a lot of time on trying to help him with that, but this was a really big challenge, and for a lot of people who are dealing with this, it's a big problem. So maybe I can talk about this first. And what I'm talking about is something called hoarding, or compulsive hoarding. And it's a compulsive disorder, a psychological disorder that people have, which is basically the inability of a person to judge the value of certain objects and get rid of them. So people have a problem throwing stuff that they don't need, and they collect more and more and more stuff that they don't really need. So they surround themselves with objects, and they just gather around objects. Now, this is something that my dad was kind of dealing with, well, throughout his whole life, as far as I remember, as far as, I was part of that life. And when I was trying to learn more about it and watch all kinds of videos and read about this condition for many years, there seems to be a consensus that there's a pattern there psychologically for what causes that. Because, you see, this is a very tricky thing, because the person can be otherwise completely functional, intelligent, whatever. It could happen to anyone. It could be a professor in university.
You see the guy, you talk to him, you don't know. You
Exactly.
can't tell about.
He's can't tell.
Everyone probably knows some guy like this, but they don't know.
Right. So, this is a problem, because if an intelligent person has this problem, then this intelligent person can also rationalize the problem. So they can say, okay, this is why I'm doing this. They have an explanation for it. So this makes it even more difficult to fight it. So this is what was happening with my dad. And when I was researching this, I found that the pattern seemed to be that there's a theme of loss, usually a loss of someone, a person in the life of the patient, that kind of triggers that reaction. Because the idea here is that, okay, I lose someone, I go through some very big tragedy in my life, and then I start clinging to objects, because inanimate objects is really the only thing that can never escape me, that I can never lose, right? So if I have some objects and surround themselves with them, I'll be really happy, because they will never leave me. And this is sort of like in a nutshell the explanation for it. I remember I used to watch this. I watched this YouTube show. They were explaining different situations, and one of them was a case of this woman who, as a very young child, she lost her father, and she loved her father, obviously, as any daughter would do. And you can kind of see the pattern forming. At first, it will be his personal belongings, so it'll be like, oh, don't throw away his shirt because it still smells like my dad, right? And it'll be other stuff, and then eventually it'll be like, oh, don't throw that shirt because that is something that my dad maybe would have liked, right? And then it just extrapolates from there. It could be anything. It could be like literally walking around the street and picking up shirts, right? So
it's basically not being able to let go.
Exactly, and it's something that usually just develops and gets more compulsive and obsessive during their life, and as the person gets older, it just gets out of control. And the problem with this, obviously, is that it's a big strain for the family, for the person itself, because at some point.
So it has always been like that since you remember yourself.
Well, I'll tell you something. So this is a very interesting issue, because as you can imagine, people dealing with this issue, it's a kind of a taboo thing. I was looking up some statistics right before we did this podcast, and I actually saw that there's like about a 12% of Americans, according to statistics, have this issue. 12%. This is a tremendous amount of people, and yet this is not something.
Does it grow with age, or it's like
it gets worse with age, but usually develops very early on. They say it's sometimes even in the childhood or early on in life it develops, and then it gets worse. There was
even a show like on some of these channels that do reality TV.
Yeah, there was the Hoarders. Yeah, there was a TV show. Yeah, that
but it was still like just a TV show, like whatever. They're like these weirdos, but apparently there are a lot of them. It's not just some like small group.
Yeah, apparently
because when I saw the show, I thought it was just a really small group of people.
Yeah. And the reason I think that it's I kind of the numbers might be even bigger is because, you know, if you have a person like this in your family, obviously it's a very shameful topic, because imagine someone like really going around and picking up garbage, you know, going through the trash bins.
Yeah, but that's some other thing. It's, I guess, the worst case of this.
Yeah, so I mean, it got to that stage with my dad. So, and this is usually like the pattern. It gets worse and worse over the years, and
So he was basically bringing.
yeah,
Other stuff
he
from
was bringing
outside.
trash. Eventually, it was like everything. Eventually, it just at the beginning it was stuff maybe. Okay, so let's go back a little bit, because you asked me what was the first time I noticed that. So, I think in this sense, if we talk about
Because, I mean, I remember going to your place. I mean, it didn't look weird.
yeah,
When was that? Maybe 10 years ago?
no more years. I mean, when you were in high school, you were home.
Yeah.
Yeah, because well, the thing was, I was living there, my mom was living there, and we're on the we're kind of controlling this as much as possible. So my mom and myself, we were cleaning the house. There were certain stashes that he would hide stuff, and also there was a big problem. We had another apartment, and that no one was living there. So he was a lot of stuff that we were.
Okay,
He was supposedly throwing away.
So
He
you
was
were
actually
doing this
taking.
since forever, or yeah?
Right.
Sorry, I interrupted.
So the first time I ever noticed that, maybe I was about 5 or 6, and like I said, it's something shameful. Like if you are aware of this and you're an intelligent person, you realize what's happening, right? You're ashamed of yourself, because you're like, it's a compulsive thing. You're doing it. It's like an addiction, right? So you're aware of that you know something's happening, but you can't control yourself, so you're trying to hide it as much as possible. So what happened was, he would either hide these things at some places that we couldn't see, or he would do it when we would not see, me and my mom, I mean. So the first time I ever remember noticing anything was when we were coming back from Poland. Maybe I was 5 or 6, and come back home like maybe after Christmas. So we'd been away for a couple of weeks, and he was alone at that time, and just being able to bring as much shit as possible. So there was a lot of stuff everywhere, like the windows, like a lot of books, a lot of like all kinds of like stuff around the apartment. And I was like, what the hell? Where did this come from? And immediately I knew, even as a kid, that this is not normal. This is not new stuff. This is not stuff from the store. This is like, I don't know where this came from the street. I don't know where this came from. So
it was basically forever for you.
Forever, right? So because if I have to play a psychoanalyst, what I think was that this came. The main trigger for that maybe happened right before my dad met my mom, and so. Okay, so I talked about the idea of loss. So in my dad's life, there was a... Okay, so before that, I want to just say, I don't want this to sound in any way disrespectful. My dad was a great guy, and you had the chance to meet him. He was a very loving person, very selfless person. His whole life, he just devoted to myself and my mom, and just, against all odds. But this was a very big issue, and I think it's good to talk about this, because people don't talk about it, and I think... this is why I wanted to do this, and it's in no way disrespectful to my dad. I loved him dearly, and I did everything. And this is what I'm going to also tell you, how I was trying to deal with that issue. So if you have a problem like this, maybe my ideas would help you out. So coming back to this, my dad had another wife before he met my mom. So he was divorced once, and the way this happened, of course, this was a little bit of a difficult issue, so it never really was openly discussed in my family, because my mom kind of didn't like the subject, because...
But you didn't know, or when did you learn this?
Right, so my mom was 36 and my dad was 48 when they met, when I was born, actually. So they met like 1 or 2 years earlier. And my dad, being 48, he... well, apparently he didn't tell my mom that he kind of omitted that part that he had a wife before and he was married before. Now, my mom being 36 and coming from Poland, being very religious and very conservative, and being 36, first of all, she wouldn't, obviously she didn't settle for just about anyone, right? So at this point, she was kind of like, okay, whoever I'm with, it's got to be pretty special. So when she found out it was already being with him, already like living together and all that, she was pretty fucking disappointed by that, and she was really angry. So the only time I ever heard about this was overhearing arguments when my parents would argue, and I would be in the other room and they would yell at each other. So that was the only time I overheard anything about that. But suffice it to say, this was completely out of the picture. Like I have a brother, right? So there's my dad had a son from this previous marriage. I met him like maybe twice in my entire life. Neither him nor this woman have ever been a part of my life. They've really been, I've never had anything to do with them. So everything I know about it, it's kind of overheard from these arguments or other discussions. And what happened was apparently,
Yeah, I mean, they wanted to be, but they want to use you they didn't have good intentions to you. I mean, this other people, your brother.
Yeah. I mean, that's another topic.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, it's not like you didn't care at all, like whatever.
Yeah, no, it's not like fuck this guy. No, it's just that these people they were done with my dad and they didn't want to do anything with him. And it wasn't his idea. Like this was really the biggest loss and regret in his life, especially his son. Right. So coming back to this, so apparently his wife apparently cheated on him. Okay, so this is what happened. And now whether this is, again, I can't really tell what actually happened, but for sure my dad walked on her and he caught her cheating on him. And perhaps this was something going on regularly. And another thing I heard from my grandma, who particularly my dad's mother, who hated that person, and she told me that when I was a kid. I don't know why, but apparently either she did it with many men or maybe even for money. I don't know if it's a matter of speech, like calling someone a whore, or it was an actual thing, but that's what happened.
So,
and
yeah, basically maybe this.
Right. So imagine this idea of like complete betrayal. And then my dad, even though this happened, he still wanted to keep the family together because of the son and everything. And she wanted a divorce, right? So they went through a very rough divorce. And at this point, the son, my brother, was about 17 years old, I think. Or like an older teenager. So he wasn't a kid or anything. So for some reason, I don't know what the legalities of this was, but it was it was like his decision who he wanted to be with, and he chose his mother. So now my dad lost both his wife and his son, and they were out of his life, like out of this, of the picture completely. So that was a big loss for him. And then on top of that, you should add also, I think, the kind of lifestyle, the kind of environment my dad lived in. We were talking about this before. We're talking about Bulgaria. My dad was born in 1942. Okay, he was living in a village near my hometown, then moved to the town. His parents never had a profession. They were not, people working in a factory or anything. They were working in agriculture. They had a house. Everything they produced, they ate. So it was like everything you own provides for you. So the more you own, the better off you are. So everything is reusable. That kind of philosophy of everything I have, and if I find something by accident, that's the biggest gift in life, right? So the whole idea of like walking down the street, if you see a screwdriver, or if you see a screw, you pick it up because maybe you will need it tomorrow, right? Even if now you don't need it, maybe you need it, right? So that kind of philosophy was really embedded in his, upbringing, right? And then the losses that he had in his life and all of that.
And also the times were different. I mean, it's not like now. I mean, we're not like some rich people, but still, now everyone can afford anything, kind of.
Yeah.
So like, the basic things are expensive now.
Right.
I mean, we take it for granted, but right. I mean, I remember some parts of it where when you had to like eat nice food only on New Year's or get like whatever. Like,
yeah, I mean, going to a restaurant is
a
thing, anything. I understand that. I'm not saying that this is bad. I'm saying that maybe this may be triggered it, or
you still remember the value of things. These
of course.
Things.
Yes. And I remember, back in my, I was living in the village with my grandparents until I was 6 when we moved to the town when I started going to school. So I remember that everything was reusable. Like we were, like clothes were like, you don't throw out even clothes because you can patch it up.
Or give it to some relative.
Right. Everything is reusable. And so that's not a bad idea. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm just saying that if you take that and extrapolate that, you can get to a sick place where that can be an obsession, and that anything is like you're shaking over the smallest thing that you have, and then it becomes this materialistic thing. So, and that's what happens with this disorder. So so this was a loss, and this was a big thing. So then you ask me, well, you were home and everything was fine. That's it. When my mom was home, when I was home, it was different. And also, now imagine another thing. This is a small town, right? And everyone is like seeing things, and everyone is kind of noticing things. So the whole idea of like, if someone finds out or if someone sees my dad like going through the garbage or whatever, it's a big deal, right? And maybe I was not a very social kid. I didn't have a lot of friends or going out or whatever. But even for myself, I had like some kids like tell me that they saw my dad or whatever. And it's not an easy thing. So he was very careful, and he didn't try to do it like he would go out at night, and he would, yeah, he had some like patterns that were very specific. Like for example, he knew where to go for what certain things, and of course this was not discussed. None of that. Like he was in complete denial. You gotta understand. Like if you even confront, if you catch him, if you caught him in the act of it, he would just pretend it wasn't him. Right? It was like everything was rationalized. Everything, there was a reason for it, but it wasn't happening. It wasn't what you think. Like he found it was like, it wasn't even. He didn't go through trash. It was like someone dropped it on the street or something. You know, that everything was distorted. So I remember he was doing this thing where, for example, you know, we had this market in town where people were selling like vegetables and fruits, and every day they would close the market. I don't know, 8 o'clock or whatever. And so he knew what time to go. Like, you know, when you have a big stand with, let's say, potatoes or something, or tomatoes, and at the end of the day, you collect all the remaining tomatoes, and some of them spill or drop on the floor. You know, some of them are like a little rotten, or, you know, hit or bumped or something. You leave them. You know, it's one tomato. So he knew what time exactly of the day to go through the market, that everyone would close down, and there'll be a couple, like there'll be a tomato there and there'll be a potato there, and he would gather those. We'll come back home, and at night he would clean them up and like remove the bumped part, and he would have a tomato or a potato. And then he would go through this place, and there'll be some, I don't know, someone would throw I don't know, in front of a specific store, they would throw away specific things, like. And at some point it got to a dangerous point, because, for example, he would go in front of pharmacies and they would throw away expired pills or stuff, and he would collect those, and you know, you don't, and he would maybe even self-medicate at times. So yeah, and this is the worst part. So when you gather shit from the street, you don't know what happened to that shit. Like, even if you pick up a potato from the ground, it could have just fallen down and just fallen on a needle, like a fucking drug user's needle. I mean, you don't know what it was on the street, right? So you can never be sure what kind of diseases or what kind of stuff you bring home. And that was the really dangerous part, even for us when we were cleaning this stuff, because, you know, you got to be careful not to, get like a cut or something when you're throwing away. And I'm talking about huge amounts of stuff eventually, you know, it was a big problem. So yeah. So when we were there, it was kind of manageable. We were cleaning. He was kind of controlling it, or he would hide it, or he would do, you know, things outside of when we were not seeing.
But still, I mean, it wasn't like he was. I mean, he was still a person. Like he wasn't like crazy in any other way.
Yeah, exactly. He was completely rational. But over time, you know, this was a.
I mean, he was still your dad, like.
Of course, yeah. And the problem was that this was something that eventually kind of. Overtook his life, and he because, you know, okay, so because there was a reason for those things. So you know how a lot of people, for example, recycle things or sell used things. So they'll say, oh, I got a lot of books, so instead of throwing them away, I'll go sell them for like paper or whatever. And they weigh the paper and they say, this is this many kilos and you get this much money. So this was like the number one excuse for all of that. So it was like, okay, I'm gonna sell everything. It's for money. We're poor. We need money. Okay, I'm providing for this family. This is it. So fuck off. This is me making extra money for the family.
I mean, so, did he have a job then?
Of course, yeah, he did. He was a doctor. He had a job and everything. But the thing was, you know, that was not. It wasn't logical.
You can always have more.
Yeah, and the thing was, if you run the actual numbers, it wasn't actually helping at all, because he would cut his clothes, or he would get dirtier. He would, you know, work over weeks and weeks just for like a couple. You know, I mean, imagine how many books you have to actually sell to make any money.
Did he ever sell any of this?
He did sometimes when we were forcing him to throw it away. We're like, we're cleaning this. You want it or not? This is going to be out. And then he was like, okay, I'm going to go sell it. And then he would go and sell it. And of course, he would make no money. I mean, no money that would actually make up for all the effort and hours and hours of bringing that shit. But he did sell some of it. And of course, you know, it's not any money was made out of it. But yeah, he was. It was something that eventually we were talking about this also, like older people in Bulgaria kind of being disillusioned with their lives, and this whole idea of, like, for example, why is it this interesting communism nostalgia, and old people.
Basically, if anyone outside Bulgaria is listening, we went through this communism until the 90s or 89, or
Yeah.
we were a communist country. But yeah.
Yeah, so the weird thing is, yeah, we were part of the Eastern Bloc, we were part of the communist countries in Europe, but whereas in many other countries, people were like, happy that they went out of it, and we were happy when we were.
My parents also, they lived in this. I also feel it kind of affected them, but not in like a mental way. But still, they have a lot of things. When I go home, I feel kind of suffocated because there are so many things everywhere. We also have it's not like it's a normal place, but
right.
I'm kind of used to more like functional stuff, I guess, lately.
Yeah, everyone has the propensity for. You
remember these big wardrobes? Like it was like the whole wall.
Yeah.
It had a place for clothes and for like all kinds of shit. They had like a glass. How do you say, glass doors, and you put like glasses behind these cups and whatever, like this big. Anyway, the sets of cups. Yeah. And all kinds of things. It was like this huge, the whole wall.
This minimalist thing that's going on right now.
And it takes like half a meter of, the whole wall plus like half a meter of your apartment. It's like huge.
Yeah. If you actually get rid of those things, like the place will be much bigger. Yeah. But the thing is, like, this whole minimalist thing where now people are like, you just need one bed and one cup and whatever. This is a kind of relatively.
That's the other end. You can be in the middle, kind of.
Exactly, right. Okay, but the other thing was actually that we were talking about this, that because of this thing that happens with my dad and my whole life kind of being around this thing, I hated that. So I kind of became the opposite of that. So in many ways, I would throw away stuff that even I could still use it, or I would overspend money.
Scared of this together.
Yeah. I'm really scared of ever being associated with something like that. So internally, I was always kind of rejecting that idea. So hoarding, even in the positive sense, for example, saving, right? Saving is a form of hoarding. You're hoarding money, right? Yeah. You're saving money. I kind of have problems with that because my idea is like, I have more, so let's spend it.
I think it's different.
Anyway, yeah. But what I'm saying is, maybe.
Yeah, but it's kind of weird. If you hoard stuff, you'll hoard probably money too.
Right. But what I'm trying to say is maybe I'm kind of on the opposite end of it because I was affected by it, and I'm trying to get away from it, separate myself from it, and it's also not healthy.
Not healthy.
Yeah. So, but anyway,
but I don't think you're that bad.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. But anyway, what I was saying is that this whole thing with now, last few years, there's this communism nostalgia in Europe, in Bulgaria specifically, where older people like our parents, who had their younger days and during the communist times, they were young, they were healthy, they were happy, they were in love.
Basically a youth nostalgia. They just related to
communism. Right. And because a lot of them, because in Bulgaria, for example, you have all the corruption, all the shit, and like the pensions being super small. And my dad, for example, even with his add-on for like being a widower, he had a little extra money, and for all of his years, like over 35 years of work, his pension was like 150 euros a month. So, of course, a guy like this would be pissed off, and he would blame the country, be like, fuck that, fuck that system, fuck the government and everything.
Oh, but yeah, because now the other interesting thing, because you said he was against the communism.
Yes, he was. He was protesting in the 1980s, and he was out there, with ZSN, the movement, with
so he kind of helped overthrow this.
Exactly, yeah. For many years he was, and then after he retired, he kind of went back to maybe I was wrong, maybe whatever, and that was an interesting thing. The way I brought it up, the reason I brought it up was because it kind of also played into that idea of hoarding, because then it was an excuse. And then it was like, you see what they did to me? They made me do this. So he kind of rejected not just like, the rules of like you shouldn't bring stuff from the street, but also like in general the society and many things. And so eventually he was completely kind of well, dependent on me and unable to kind of be a real member of society. He, for example, he wouldn't go to a store because he was like, I don't need to buy stuff from the store. I can, he can find it on the street. He could get food from the street. He could get clothes from the street. He could get anything. So why go to the store? Why buy anything, right? Why buy? He never went to.
I think you're much better at this side for some reason.
All right. He didn't pay for tickets, for example, for a bus ticket or something. He would wait and catch a ride instead. You see a 70-year-old person catching a ride, and tell me, how can I prevent this? When he was coming to visit me or I was going to him, I would literally physically take him in a cab and put him on a bus and buy him a ticket and sit him and put him the ticket in his hand and be like, okay, go now and go home. Because otherwise, if I don't do this, he will be on the street in the middle of winter catching a ride, because that would save him a couple of money because he would catch a ride. Can you fucking imagine? And it would be in the middle of the winter, and he would take off his cap so people can see his silver hair and be more willing to stop. So, and the problem with that is, as much as I wanted to help him, he was really resistant of that. He didn't, that because you saw that too. He wasn't. He didn't let me help him much. It's good, man. No worries.
I don't know. I think it's.
It's good. So, he was kind of resisting my help, and he was a man from a different generation, from a different kind of time. He had different ideas. For example, I remember a big kind of hit for him was when I broke up with my ex-girlfriend, because for some reason he was always hoping that, okay, so one day I'm gonna marry this girl and he's gonna move with us and she's gonna cook and clean and clean his clothes and whatever, and when I broke up with her, and he was like, why, what happened, why did you do this? And I'm like, listen, Dad, doesn't matter who I'm with or if I'm with anyone. You are my responsibility. You're my dad. So I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to cook for you and clean for you and all that. And he didn't like that. It wasn't okay for him. He was like, no, it's got to be your wife. You know what I mean? And
maybe
find a woman who's going to be okay with that. And also, I wouldn't want to do this to any other girl. Imagine I meet a girl and like, okay, I really like you. Also, I'd like you to take care of my dad. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want the person to do that. I mean, if she wanted to, sure, but I wouldn't ever make a person do that. That's my responsibility. Mm-hmm. I do this as a son. So that was a problem because he was anyway. So the idea of this particular problem with his hoarding was that it eventually affected his quality of life. He had so much shit in the house that he couldn't. It wasn't clean. There were infestation of insects. There were all kinds of shit there. It was hygienically dangerous for him. It was, he didn't have much space, so it was difficult. So all you can do, and the problem is, it's difficult to clean the place. You go in there, it's a fight, and it's a nasty fight. You know what I mean? Because he cares about these objects so much, and he doesn't even know what he has because there's so many of them that he doesn't even know that what is over there at this place. He doesn't know. It's so many stuff on things that he doesn't remember what he found in that particular day and put there. But if you try to throw it in front of him, it's gonna be terrible, right? So, I mean, he's gonna physically fight you for this. So I had to come up, because I went through different things. Usually what the psychologists recommend is, the thing is, there's no treatment, there's no medication for that. The only thing that people recommend is behavioral treatment. So you kind of sit down with the person and you talk and you say, okay, you have this collection of, let's say, 50 glasses, because once you found one glass, you're like, wait, if my glass breaks when I have an extra glass now, but then you found another and another, and now you have 50 glasses. So tell me, do you need 50 glasses? How many do you really need, right? And you go one by one. Is this glass okay? Do you really need this, or can we throw this away? What about this one? This is actually broken. It's chipped. Someone threw it on the street for a reason, right? Do you need this one? Right. So one by one, you go through all the objects. But this was impossible. I tried this. It's impossible, really. You can maybe get rid of like 5% of the stuff this way.
Yeah, I mean, then he'll get more, right?
Right. So this I tried, didn't work. Arguing didn't work. Even though there was some element of like, try like when I would go in and throw stuff away, he would get really pissed off and eventually he would get scared. He'd be like, oh shit, now I can't do this anymore because he'll throw it away. So for a while that worked. Like for a while you could kind of scare him that, okay, I'm not gonna do it because it's pointless. Why should I, bring all this stuff every day when he's gonna throw it away, right? I mean, every logical person would go, I'm not gonna do it because you're gonna throw it away. Imagine you live with a girlfriend and you bring a guitar home and she throws it away. You're not gonna bring it home. You're gonna leave it in my place, for example, right? But that doesn't work either for a long time. So then finally, I started doing these kind of tricks. Like you would trick a kid, for example. When you can't fight with like a 3-year-old kid. It's going to start crying. It doesn't understand logic. It doesn't understand there's how a conversation is going. So you kind of trick it. So I would do things like, for example, he would come. At that time, I was living in Sofia. He was staying in my hometown in Velikotanovo. So he would come over on Friday, for example, and I would say, okay, Dad, I'm going with my girlfriend. I'm going to be tonight with her. I'm going to come back tomorrow morning. And I would get in my car in the middle of the night and drive to Trnovo. It's a 3-hour ride. Go and clean the whole night so that the neighbors don't see me throwing away bags and bags and bags of shit. Clean the whole place, lock it, come back with the car the next morning. So the next day he goes back home, he sees it all empty, he's mad, but he can't do much, it's clean. So at least he has this quality of life improved, right? So I would do these tricks, so I would kind of make a combination of all these things and eventually, make things better. But it was all temporary solution. It was not,
I mean, better for you. I mean, from your point of view, maybe it was better for him to be surrounded with. But yeah, whatever.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, for sure. It's he was really he was in pain with losing all this stuff, but and also that time
doesn't sound like there is any solution to this.
There is no solution that I know of, and it's really bad. And the thing is, as I'm, as things were progressing. And eventually he got the dementia too. It was I could almost see it in his hoarding behavior how it was becoming more irrational. At the beginning it was like, okay, so you can see all the paper stuff here, all the metal stuff here, but then it was anything. So you could see like a paper here and a book on top of it, and then there would be a bag full of carrots, and then on top of that there'll be some like underwear, and there will be like children's toys, and on top of that there'll be other stuff, and there'll be a chair, and there'll be he would bring stuff that I couldn't get out of being a strong man. I can't imagine. There was one time I saw an engine from a motorbike engine brought home. There were all kinds of furnitures. There were all kinds of devices. There was underwear. There was a shitload of shoes, female shoes. There was all kinds of stuff. There was even like pavement bricks, from the pavement. You bring a brick. Why would he carry a brick, And so you would see that in the irrational order of these things, you would say, okay, that's not good. I mean, he used to at least separate things. Now it's all together, and now this back with the carrots, it's all rotten inside, and there's all insects and everything. So I'll go, okay. As he was going worse and worse kind of mentally, also his behavior went worse, and eventually when he wasn't moving and he wasn't going out anymore, at least that was kind of a silver lining to that. But he was sick, he couldn't leave the house. I had this woman, she was coming home every day and taking care of him, and I was like, okay, so at least he's not bringing stuff home, so at least every day he has food, and she's cooking for him and cleaning and everything, so at least it's clean. But and then, even then, at the end, even though he didn't go out to bring stuff, within the house with the few things that he had, he also would do some small kind of hoarding routines. For example, I told you this at the very end. When he was lying in bed, and he was like, this was last week before he passed away. And he had nothing around, he was just lying in bed, and I would observe him, I would be next to him. And he would clench his hands like this. And even in his sleep, he would be like this. And it's impossible. You wouldn't be able to unclench him. Like, Dad, there's nothing in your hand. Just open your hand. Look, there's nothing. And he would finally open it and look and see that there's nothing there. And be perplexed and be surprised. Like, what? because he thought that he had something. Like he thought that maybe he was gathering something, and in his fists in that last moment, even when he was in bed, he was trying to hold on to something, not to lose something. So it's incredible, like how deeply embedded this was. That even in that situation where he was really, like, he wasn't almost able to talk and really like forgetting things and everything, he had that reflex to hold on to things and kind of get things together. And so yeah, this is a terrible thing, hoarding. And the problem is that people a lot of times are ashamed of their relatives who are in this situation, because otherwise they could be intelligent, they could be healthy, they could be strong, they could be reasonable. You're like, oh, this guy's a smart guy, he's a professor, he has a job, whatever. So he brings shit home, he doesn't want me to clean it, he argues with me, right? So fuck him. So they leave these people alone to their own demise, and they keep bringing stuff because they can't control themselves. And at the end of the day, you see someone, I don't know, in the middle of the street with some trash and stuff, and you go, who is this guy? What kind of hobo is this? You don't know that this might be your neighbor with this issue, right?
Some professor.
Or your high school teacher or something, someone who has this issue, right? Because you can't leave these people, they need help. Even though they fight you, they will keep fighting you, it's a big problem. And especially when they're older, especially when they're alone, they can't help themselves. There's no logical solution to it. So as hard as it is, you gotta help them out, and you gotta clean, and that's it. Just clean, keep cleaning. I've cleaned a lot. Like there've been the maximum I did was at one point it was 25 hours straight. I went in the afternoon and I cleaned until the next day in the evening. So like 25 hours, and then I just passed out and I went to sleep. And then the next day I walk back again and stopped actually cleaning, because the 25 hours cleaning, it was just like throwing away stuff. And then I actually started going with detergents and spraying and stuff. It's a lot of stuff, man. I mean, you can't even imagine like how many things you can fit under a bed or in a. You can't even imagine how because it's all very neatly stacked. It's everything is just like fit in every kind of corner, every place. He would stack things even in his pockets. Every single pocket and every single jacket and every everything would be filled with stuff. So that was a terrible thing. And so that's why I wanted to bring this up. And this was this is a bad thing, but I don't know. I hope maybe someday people will come up with it. Even in the scientific community, I think it wasn't until 2013 that this was recognized as a separate disorder. Until then, it was like part of
5 years ago. Wow.
I think it was part of like OCD before. It was like people didn't really recognize it as a separate thing, but it is an issue, and sometimes it could happen. Of course, there is certain correlations. Like they see in depressed people, it happens more. In people with other disorders like schizophrenics, or for example manic kind of people, schizoid people, it happens more. But it is a separate thing, and it is a separate kind of issue, and it has to be recognized as such. So yeah, and I don't know, I can talk about, I don't know, grief and loss, and I don't know, what happened with my mom, or I don't know, I don't want this to be too depressing.
Say something good about her, that like,
yeah.
Well,
my dad was a great guy. He was a doctor. He was a general practitioner. For 35 years
he was doctor at the village that he
yes.
lived here. He was like a known one, like everyone was coming for.
Yeah. So he worked for most years. He worked at a village next to his home village, and it's a small village. I don't know, it's about 200 people or something. But yeah, his job was just basically going house to house and checking on people, and it was just, how Bulgarian villages are. It's mostly old people, mostly people who are living by themselves, or so he had a personal relationship with every single person he knew, and he would help them out. And a lot of times they wouldn't pay him or anything, so it was just like, hey, what's up, as he would sit down and talk to them. He was a very social person, much more than I would ever be. Like he really liked the company of people. He really liked to talk with people and to be around people, which was a really big problem when my mom passed away, because he was afraid of the house, being alone in the house. That I was in Sofia, and I wanted him to be with me, and I kept inviting him over. He just didn't like it because he didn't know anyone here, so he didn't want to come over and stay here.
He was coming often.
he was coming often, yeah. At the end of it, he was like, coming every like 2 weeks and staying for like 3 or 4 days. But still, that was sort of a thing because so many times every time I went home, I would clean everything and throw it away. That he decided he would rather come here often than let me go home. So in a way, yeah, he was coming, so I would not go home. He's like, no, I'm gonna come. It's okay. Anyway, but yeah, so he was. He always wanted to go out, and after my mom passed away, he was just like getting out of the house very early in the morning and hanging out with these people in the village all day long, and just coming back really late at night, really tired, and just passing out and just going to sleep. And he worked in this one village for many years. Then he worked in two or three more villages. So overall, like 4 different villages in the course of his life. And by the end of it, yeah, almost until the end, he was there, and he was helping people in like various ways, not just like as a doctor, but also like because he would come back to town, so he would go to the buy stuff for them. There was one lady that was in the village where he last worked. That she was a widower, and he would go like chop some wood for her, or bring her food, or stuff like that she couldn't do because she couldn't walk much, or was like an old person. So he would help with some physical labor around, and yeah, so he was kind of an all purpose kind of guy, and in many ways he was also kind of he was there for these guys, and he was their friends, and his phone was ringing all the time. They were calling him for everything. Yeah, well, come on, what's up, doctor? How are you doing? Will you come over, see us, whatever. So yeah, he was. I think people liked him, and he loved people, and he was around them his whole life, and he was a very intelligent guy. He loved poetry. He loved reading books. He was writing down stuff. But that
Yeah, I remember this. I mean, because when I met him, he was, I think, like he was pretty bad. I mean, like his state.
You mean last time, a couple of months ago? Yeah, I was like whatever.
But the thing is, we just talked about random things around him. Like we didn't like engage with him that much, but he was listening. And at some point, you were like talk about this book that you read now,
the Gulag Archipelago. Yeah.
Yes, and you were like thinking. You were like, I don't know why you mentioned this book, but you couldn't remember the author. It was like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? And your dad was just spit out the name, like
Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Yeah, and I was
like really weird about it.
I was thinking about getting this book, but I still didn't have it. He knew it immediately. Yeah, he was an intelligent guy, and it's just very weird bizarre that by the end of his life he kind of switched politically to that kind of nostalgia. But I don't think it was more of a kind of denial thing than reasonable thing. I think if he wasn't in control of his full faculties, and he was fully just as he was when he was younger, he would never make that. But anyway, he was also a very funny guy too. I remember as a kid, it was very funny because you know how your parents are. You never kind of really meet them until they're like around other people. Oh, yeah. And you kind of that's your parent, but it's also a person. It's also a guy. It's a man. He has his own character and stuff. And I remember these moments when as a kid we would have parties and stuff, and people around, and he would just crack the funniest jokes, man. I was just laughing so hard. It's like, who is this guy? He was never like this. I mean, he was funny and all that, but with me too, and fun, but never like these inappropriate jokes and all that stuff. It was crazy.
So yeah. I mean, that's where you got.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. Yes. I don't know.
I mean, probably.
Yeah, and it's it's what it is, and I did my best. I thought about taking him with me, but because of his condition, you see, with dementia, people are very confused and forget stuff, and it's not recommended to be somewhere in a new place where you don't know the language. You can get lost and all that. So it was really, he spent his last days in home with a person who cared.
Home was best.
Yeah, who cared about him. And that we tried this thing with a hospice, and it was a terrible place, and I really hated it.
Yeah, it was, oh my God, this was such a bad place.
Yeah, and
he was for a short time there. I mean, you took him out fast.
So yeah,
It was
I
so
tried
sad.
that too, and it's home was much better, and this lady was really nice, and she was living very near, and he was we're getting all the medication and everything. We did all the tests and everything, but I don't know. It's just every time is different, and I think in any kind of silver lining to this is the fact that I think at least this is the end of his suffering. I mean, his life really wasn't that great after my mom passed away. He was much older than her. His kind of hope was, okay, I'm marrying this young chick, and all that. It's my second chance. She's not gonna cheat on me or lose me or abandon me like this other one. And then she passed away, and it was another loss for him. I remember that. So when I moved away from home when I was 19 and I came here to study and all that, there was a big increase in his hoarding because I was out of the house. So my mom would do stuff, but I was not there. So, and I was kind of, at that point when I was younger, I was much more aggressive. I was like, no, dad, or, throw away the stuff. I'm like, we're not having a conversation about this. We're cleaning the house, right? And my mom was like, no, you can do this. My mom was much more respectful. She was like, no, you can't do this, don't, this is your dad. Don't, or don't argue with him and then you leave and then he's with me and all that. So, when my mom was gone, he was by, so first when I left, he was just with my mom so he could hoard more, and then when my mom passed away he was by himself, so then it just went crazy, and so yeah, it was to a point where it really wasn't like there wasn't it wasn't the same comfort that he had before, and someone really cleaning diligent every single day, throwing stuff away and cleaning and just keeping the work and all that. And really that's the only thing that you can do for these people is they have the problem, so the solution is they bring you clean, they bring you clean. So there's no reasoning, there's
But
no
okay,
logical.
so I guess once you get there, I wonder if you can kind of prevent this if you see that maybe your parent is going that way, or you yourself are going. Maybe if you should do some.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware though. This is the thing
Or it's
because
like so
because he was in
gradual
such a
that-
denial of it. You know what I mean? Like it's like a alcoholic, for example. It's like I drink, but
Yeah,
what?
but
I'm
still
in
you're like,
control.
come on,
I'm-
stop now, stop drinking.
Right, but that's the thing. But they don't realize. They go, I can stop anywhere, any moment
yeah,
I
I
want.
know, but still,
Right?
I mean, but so the solution is right there and then just to stop in
Yeah.
some way,
Yeah. And
because later it will be like your body won't. Even if you stop later, your body will be in a really bad state. Like I've heard, like some people. I mean, physically they get like.
yeah, there's withdrawal. Yeah. for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So
Yeah, and anyway, I was thinking also another thing I wanted to talk about is like the general idea of like mental issues and because it's such a top, like both my mom, this is such an interesting thing. So my mom passed away 2.5 years ago. She had glioblastoma. It's a tumor. It's also called GBM. That's the short for glioblastoma. It's a type of very malicious tumor that usually, well, it's lethal and especially after like a certain age, after 60. And even though she was operated, it was completely removed, and there was very aggressive chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and nothing helped. And 8 months after she was diagnosed, she passed away. And one of the worst things about it is, cancer is such an epidemic, and it affects, like, literally there's no family, there's no person you can talk to that doesn't know someone in his family who's suffering.
Yeah.
It's such a terrible thing. And we don't even realize, what is it? Is it that our medicine is so much better than we can recognize all these types of cancers? Or is it really the environment that's so sick that everything just makes you sick and you can develop these cancerous cells in every part of your body? I don't know.
I mean, because it's a disease that you get later after you've multiplied, so it's kind of it didn't survive evolution and all of this.
Right.
Basically,
I mean, it's some sort of bug,
carried
right?
on.
Of some cell
It's
that kind of
kind of a-
mutates and.
As far as I know, it's some like it's aggregation of many things, like many defects in
Right.
genes.
Maybe, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's how.
I mean, there's some things in my mom that I know that maybe they have contributed to this, but you never really know for sure. For example, at some point in her life, because she was a nurse, and so for most of her life she was a nurse, but then at some point after I was born, she wasn't employed, and then many years later she started another job because she lost her license. and she started a job at this factory near home where it was an industrial factory for clothes. And her job was they were doing these clothes for like some Italian brand. And you know, sometimes when you have a clothes like some clothes, they're factory ironed. Like there's a very first ironing that goes on and just like makes the shape of the and then they sell it, right? And usually it happens like right off when they color the clothes and they're still wet, and you iron them with this very big iron of super. You press them with this high temperature iron. So she was doing that, and all of these chemicals from those new clothes, it just all evaporates in her face, and she inhales all that. And there were some, because this factory was there for many years, and she was talking about some, because she had also some issues with her kidneys, and it was some talk that maybe this was causing, I mean, this was cancerous, or maybe that was something that, I don't know if that's the case or not. But the point is, what I was trying to say, that cancer is a terrible thing, but there's some moment where if you know that this is going to happen and you're going to die and you have this much time, you still have the ability to, I don't know, send some final message, put your things in order, do something, write a letter, I don't know, do something with the remaining time that you have. There's something else that happens when you have a brain tumor that affects you mentally, and you can't do that either, because then you're dying, but you don't even realize you're dying in 8 months, but you're already gone as a person. You're not the same person anymore. So what happened with my mom is she had a headache. There was nothing else. Nothing. She had a headache for a couple of days. She goes to the doctor, and she wasn't even able to go to the doctor. So this was, I was calling her, hey mom, what's up? You're, because I was like, mom, you gotta go to the doctor. It was on the weekend. She was like, okay, I'm gonna call them up. On Monday, I go to the doctor. On Monday, I call her, what's up? Are you at the doctor's? She's like, yeah, I'm putting on my shoes. I'm about to leave. Okay. I call her in an hour. I'm still putting on my shoes. I'm like, all right, this is not good. Immediately, I was at work here. I get in my car. I drive back home. I go home. She's still on the bed putting on her shoes on. Like, what's going on, mom? What's happening? I take her. We go to the doctors. They make a tumor, what is it called? A brain scan. And they see the tumor. And they say, well, the problem is not only the tumor was so big, but also because of the size of the tumor, the brain was swollen up inside, and from the swelling, the pressure of the tumor, that actually caused the pain, and that caused this kind of confusion, and she didn't know everything, like where she was and what was happening. So when we took her immediately to the hospital to be operated, everything, they couldn't operate her immediately because of the swelling. So if they opened it up, it would just explode from the pressure. So they had to put her on special medication to reduce the swelling. And only after that, the next day, they actually operated. So after that happened, was it from the damage, from the swelling? Was it from the tumor already? She was not the same person after the operation, even after the operation. And she was still functional. She was walking around, talking, everything okay for many months still. So it was kind of slowly deteriorating. But she wasn't the same. Like, something that often happens in those cases is there's this big shift in personality. So one person is one type, and then there's like 180 of their personality. So my mom, for example, she was a very nervous person and very emotional. She would get triggered by anything, start crying or get angry about something. This was the opposite. Everyone around her was like crying and depressed, like, oh my God, what's happening? Well, you're so young. She wasn't even aware of what was happening. So that was maybe the only good thing about it, that she never cried once after she was diagnosed. She didn't even know what was going on, right? Everyone around her was like running around crazy. And anyhow, so I saw that happening to my mom, and it was the scariest shit to see your mom just like a completely different person. And then I saw something similar with my dad with his dementia, which was the same, also talking strange things that doesn't make sense, all these changes. And for me, also having those, like, first of all, with my dad for many years having this disorder with the hoarding, and then my mom, and then my dad, I've always had this fear myself of losing your mind. For me, that's like a personal phobia. Like, that would be the scariest thing. And when I was doing my my Peru adventures with ayahuasca and psychedelic drugs, which the experience of that, I mean, you know yourself, is like very much like losing your mind. You could kind of like disintegrate, and you don't know what's happening, where you are, who you are, anything. That was one of the scariest demons, that my personal demons that I kind of confronted, was like, what would happen if I lose my mind? Would I even know it? You know, and that still is to me like very very scary to me, that idea. I don't know.
Well, as the book I'm reading says, it's karma.
Yeah, and also like you said, like you know, these things, like the very few things that we know about those psychedelics is that there seems to be some correlation with people who are genetically predisposed to.
We keep mentioning this like we're some junkies. Maybe we should talk about this sometime. I mean,
no, we should. Yeah, I mean,
we had some experiences.
Yeah.
Like I one, he a bit more, but
Yeah.
we're not addicts or something.
No, of course not.
But it's pretty interesting things.
I think this thing. If I can learn from anything from that, is that there's a lot of responsibility for us personally to be healthy, and there's a lot of responsibility to be mentally healthy, and people don't think about it a lot.
That's also
Because you might think about like physical health.
Yeah, I'm also kind of scared of this because we're now young still.
Right.
I mean, we have a bit more
But
time.
you don't even know how many things happen now
Yeah,
that
that
will
will
affect
affect me,
you
yeah.
50 years from now. You know what I mean?
It's fucked up because when it happens, it's okay. Fuck, I did this wrong. Fuck, but
Right.
it's too late now.
And it's too late, and you can't do shit.
You
You
should've
don't
thought
even
about this
realize
then.
it. Other people
Yeah.
then realize it about you. Other people then make a podcast about you and talk about it, but you're
Oh, yeah.
like laying on the bed. You know what I mean? So this is scary, and this is very, very responsible. Is to know that your brain
So-
is part of your
so what
body.
do you think you should do?
Well,
I mean, eating healthy.
drugs is one thing. You know, we
I
joke
mean,
about it.
doing less of them, not more.
No, about this psychedelics. It's one thing that you know that.
But
Yeah, that's something that to have in mind. It's one thing that
But there is
potentially
something
can help
else.
people. Yeah, there
No,
are
but-
there are a
but-
lot of things.
But the
There's-
studies say, I mean, not the studies, but there are like examples that it kind of unlocked it. Like if you have,
oh yes, yeah.
if you,
But there's a lot of things. For example,
I mean,
you
it
know,
unlocked like dementia or some
right.
disease.
But you know, like for example, Alzheimer's is a type of dementia, right? And you know how studies of Alzheimer's show that, for example, if you if you study a new language in your 40s, or if you read books and stuff like that, mental exercises in general
Help.
keep your mind healthier
Yeah.
over the long run.
Makes sense.
You know how it is? Like we used to talk about this. People seem to settle at some point. Like
Yeah. Like
you
that's
spend
it,
12 hours of your life learning, and then in the university another 5, and then all of a sudden you stop.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, how many grown-ups do you know, people with families, jobs, and all that, don't read books? Like they read one book a year, or when they go on vacation.
Yeah, I mean,
And how,
Yeah.
you know, they don't exercise their mind, really. They're just stuck in a pattern. They do the same thing over and over. And maybe that causes some problems. I don't know.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You got to be responsible. You got to think that, you got to exercise the mind.
Yeah,
It's
like
very
always,
important.
always try to learn maybe something new. I mean,
Yeah.
this year.
Creativity helps a lot, I think. Those things
Yeah.
like coming up with stuff like songs or idea or
Yeah.
just writing stuff. All of these things are very useful, I think.
Because it's just another way to relax you. I mean, it's not like some effort or some hard work. It's instead of watching TV, just get the guitar and play with it.
Yeah. Look at this dog. Like this guy can run like crazy. We go out and run, and he's like I was out in the park before I came here with him, and just with the laser running around. He's unstoppable.
Yeah, maybe
and,
actually, maybe
And
don't-
you see, it's an instinct for him. He likes to run. He has the desire. He knows that if he doesn't run, he gets sick.
Oh, but maybe dogs help you with this. Like, I
They
mean,
do, yeah, for sure. I mean, the whole idea of like
once your kid goes like to study, you can get a dog and
Yeah.
get care of it. Take care of it.
get rid of the kid, get a dog. It's all good.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, yeah, I think you should think about things like that, and never give up on self improvement, even if it's for the improvement of others. Even if it's about okay, I got a family to think about. Sure, but give them the example of being a great guy who continually improves, not just being the kind of guy that all these guys that come back from work and just I'm tired and just lay down, leave me alone. I do this for you and so you have money. Yeah, things that like be the kind of person that you want your kids to be. If you want them to be happy, and just don't tell them that, be happy yourself, and then they'll follow the example. I don't know.
I don't know, maybe it's the opposite. Like your children are afraid of the bad things in you, so they avoid
Yeah,
them.
maybe there's like a perfect middle where like it's a
Or
little
it's
bit.
like it's like cycles. One
It's
kid.
funny. Yeah, some people like, for example, like kids from divorced families usually make perfect like they never get divorced usually
Hmm.
because they come from divorced families, so they know how much they want to have a really meaningful relationship, and they usually don't divorce.
Yeah, they know the impact of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, like things like that. So yeah, man, I don't know. So, but anyhow, yeah, I don't know. Is there something else we should talk about, or
I mean, maybe it's fine.
guys? I didn't want this to be too depressing. I hope it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe you can tell.
I don't think so. I mean, I think it was just sharing some experience.
I think everyone goes through these things, and we have examples like this.
But actually, I haven't talked. I mean, as far as I know, until now, it's like 3 people knew about this.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't have a problem talking about this, even though this is a very personal thing. And to be honest, I haven't really told anyone about my dad's hoarding problem in particular, like ever, besides you and like very close friends, because it's a very personal thing. And when you say it, you don't want people to think, oh, like as if I'm saying something bad about him,
Yeah.
because it's not. It has nothing to do with his character, and it has nothing to do with his qualities. It's a problem that people have, just like, I don't know, like if you have AIDS, it doesn't mean you're a bad person, which I might have it. I don't know. What I'm saying is,
That's
this doesn't change who he is or who he was, and this is why I wanted to bring it up, because I wanted to address it. So I guess that's a wrap, man. Thanks
Yeah.
for inviting me to
Sure.
this show.
Anytime.
And yeah, we're gonna be back soon with some new guests and new stuff. And thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Tell your mom. And yeah, all the best, guys. And stick around for more.
Bye.